I believe that we are live. Hello, everybody. This is the Shaun King stream. I'm Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm the technology editor of Breitbart.com. I run Breitbart Tech, which is our tech channel, together with Noah Doulis. I'm joined today by Alan Bukhari, who's a writer for Breitbart. I'm joined by Michael Poole, who is a researcher for me, and our first guest, who is waiting in the wings, ready to go, Vicky Pate, the investigative blogger. For the viewers who are not fully apprised of this story, Shaun King was a figurehead in the Black Lives Matter movement, but he's come under increasing strain and pressure from his fellow activists in the last couple of weeks after a series of race and financial scandals. We're going to jump straight into this because I think the best people to talk you through the Shaun King story, and most viewers will be watching because they're already familiar with the basics, is the blogger who kicked most of this off. Vicky, thank you for joining us. First of all, you were responsible for our story at Breitbart about the race allegations about Shaun King, but that's not where it started for you, was it? You've been looking into Shaun King for a while. Tell us what first piqued your curiosity about this Black Lives Matter organizer, who is now the senior justice writer of the New York Daily News, a salaried journalist, and we're going to be investigating over the next 2 hours with a variety of different journalists and guests this sort of extraordinary state of affairs where somebody with such a curious and checkered past has managed to ingratiate himself into a position of real authority and seniority in a printed national newspaper. So Vicky, tell us what first drew your attention to Shaun King. What was it that you sort of first became interested in, and what did you do? How did you first start exploring the subject?
Well, I've always followed Benjamin Crump, the attorney Benjamin Crump, and his cases. And so I was following the Mike Brown case. I have a bad echo.
How did you first?
But Charles Johnson from Go News was going to get the juvenile records for Mike Brown. Well, Shaun King, that ticked him off, so he put up that Charles Johnson was a pedophile, and not only said it, but put up a police report that said Charles Johnson, with I think the birth date was like a year off, that this was his police report, that he was a pedophile. And, I mean, you can call people a lot of things, but there's some things that, you know, I mean, even racist, whatever, but to call a man a pedophile will stick forever. And so I thought only
interaction with him was with him sort of making a false allegation on the basis of a mistake. He sort of got two names muddled up, or somebody else who had the same name, and he was throwing around allegations about a right-wing journalist, right?
Right, and I think he probably knew that it was the wrong. People had told him that it was the wrong Charles Johnson, but he continued to put it up and didn't take it down. But so that got me to that. So then I thought, well, who is this guy that he would make this kind of allegation? He has to have a shaky past, right? So I started looking into him, and all I could find were good things, like hundreds of blogs about how great he was. He was on CNN. He was a philanthropist. You know, all these great things. We'll come to find out later, he had a good publicist that was doing all this. So I had to really dig, and then I started finding about a pastor that he had worked for. He accused of being a pedophile and of molesting children in the church, which the pastor is still going. It was just false allegations. So then my curiosity was really piqued, and I kept looking, and there was Shaun saying his life story, that he was the first documented hate crime in Kentucky. Couldn't find anything to corroborate that. It was months later that Daily Caller got the police report that proved Shaun was lying, that he wasn't beat up by 14 rednecks. So this just got me to looking into Hope Mob, into his Twitch change, into all these charities, the worst being a home in Haiti, which he was doing while he was the pastor at his church. So all of this I just kept looking and looking, and I was putting it on Twitter, and I would put something on Twitter, I would get suspended. And it wasn't until like May that I thought, there has to be something I can prove to show that he is not credible.
Suspended from Twitter. What was happening? So presumably you were just reporting on facts. Why were you getting suspended from a social network?
Um, I believe because Shaun had been in business with Claire Ortiz, who was she worked for Twitter. I'm not sure if she's still with them now. She was at the time. But my opinion only was that he was probably asking her to suspend me. I don't know. It was just after I would go on Twitter and put up my blog and say, this is what's happening with him, I would get suspended every single time.
I see. So you have a hunch he had a mate at Twitter or something who was helping him out with people asking difficult and troubling questions. So let's move on to the race thing.
Okay, so the race thing only came up in June, in like May and June, probably. I mean, I'd always thought about it, but there was really, because his entire family is white. All the Facebook, the extended family, everyone's white. And so I thought, this is just the one thing. If I can just prove this, then his credibility will certainly be ruined, right? You would think.
You would imagine.
We both know now that that's not true.
What happened in the end?
No, you get a job at New York Daily News. So that's what happened. And then I and some other people behind the scenes, because I don't ever let anything out until I'm pretty sure about it. And we started looking into, so what a friend of mine he's actually a detective that didn't want his name mentioned, actually got the birth certificate in the first place. And he sent it to me, and then I thought about it. And then I think that's when you and I started talking.
Right.
And I was being hasty and said, well, I'm going to just put it up since you haven't put it up yet, but you were going through making sure the legal aspects were all correct. So that's what happened. Yeah. That's when you and I started talking. I was the only one that had the birth certificate, and then we started talking about it. And you said, can you prove 100%? And I said, yes, I can. And that's how it got started.
Right, so what we did at Breitbart, obviously, we had to sort of retrace your steps. So
right.
I asked you, what were the various sort of steps you went through? So we too went to the Kentucky courthouse and got the birth certificate. We looked up these guys, and we came to the same conclusion that you did, that that Shaun, at a bare minimum, had misled people when he said he was sure that he was biracial. And of course, he'd accepted a scholarship from Oprah Winfrey to Morehouse College, as a historically black college, scholarship that, as far as I can tell, has only ever been awarded to black boys in the past. And so, yeah, we reported on your findings, and tell us what happened next.
What do you mean? What happened next?
Well, so after we released, this information, Shaun's explanation was quite extraordinary, wasn't it? And also the method, and the way that he responded. So talk us through, how he responded to these allegations sort of becoming, because it was a major international story, of course. It was on CNN, it was on Fox, it was on pretty much every major media outlet. I had a researcher put it all together at the time. I think we came up with something like 300 or 400 news stories in the first couple of days from every major outlet, everywhere. People wanted to know if this was the new Rachel Dolezal, if this was a guy who had presented himself as biracial perhaps for professional, social, even financial advantage, whilst having no evidence that either of his parents was black, and indeed having every reason to suppose that neither of them were. So talk us through his reaction, so how he responded and what his defense was.
I believe his very first tweet was, Vicky Pate is a racist, and he gave me a lot of great publicity because he put in he listed my website, and I got like 40,000 hits in an hour, and he just said it was due to right-wing nut jobs, racist, and we kind of knew that the only out he had was to say his mother had an affair with a black man. I mean, that's the only thing he could say, because we had the proof. I mean, the day I found his dad's mugshot, he looks just like Shaun. I mean, they look alike. And then you have to wonder, why would his mother have an affair with a black man and still name her son after the white father? I mean, that doesn't make sense. You know what I mean? And so that was his reaction. I mean, that was...
But he basically said, as I understand it, he sort of took some time to bluster and sort of block people and call them names. I mean, this is quite a typical thing on the left, isn't it? We've seen this many times before.
Right.
You'll get an investigative blogger like yourself, or you'll get a journalist, or you'll get anybody who's reporting on something awkward or inconvenient, will get called names as a way to shut down the discussion, as a way to avoid having to deal with the facts, as a way of avoid having to confront the awful reality of whatever it is that they've reported on. They get called a racist or a sexist or any number of other things. So that's what's happened to you. Are you on? I mean, you don't have a Vicky Pate Twitter account anymore, right? You can't get back on the social network as a result of your reporting on this issue. You've been banned from Twitter. That's right, isn't it?
Permanently, and my website. I can't use my website in a bio on any Twitter page.
And it gets immediately banned.
Oh, I was permanently banned. Like, I can't use my name, which I did the day you broke the story. I did it anyway, and I
saw that. I remember.
Yeah, so I didn't care. I mean, they could ban me, but I had to be on to see
what's going on. Yeah.
Right, and you know, Shaun King, the thing he doesn't do is answer questions. If you'll notice, and I've seen this all through, because I could probably write a book on Shaun King at this point. He never answers questions. He always writes it out, and then no questions asked. You're not allowed to ask. Even I've heard podcasts he goes on with Karen Hunter just about every day, every week, but she's not allowed to ask him about this. You know, he's like Hillary Clinton. This is, you know, I said it's this way, and leave it.
That's all there is to it, and you're not allowed to ask questions. I remember when he sent a friend on, I think, to CNN after the race revelations first came to light, who said that she'd spoken to Shaun and informed her that he was black, but that no one's allowed to ask any questions, and that's all there is to it, and that's the end of the matter. And unfortunately, the public, the readers were like, well, sort of not the end of the matter, really, is it? And what's been most interesting for me is watching what that story that you, of course, broke first and that we picked up on, what that story has sort of snowballed into now. And we're going to be talking in the second hour of this show about some of the financial allegations around Shaun King. We're going to talk also about his sort of extraordinary Twitter antics and some incredible emails that Oliver Darcy at the the Blaze received. We're also going to have on Chuck Ross from the Daily Caller, two guys who've done great reporting on this. And shortly in this hour, we're going to talk to Lee Stranahan, who's one of Breitbart's resident experts in protest movements, who's been covering Black Lives Matter for an awfully long time. Before we do that, Vicky, let me ask you, lastly, when you started out on this mission, and you've now been reporting about this guy for an awfully long time, and you found out so much about him, as you say, you could probably write a book on him. Did you have any idea that just reporting facts about a person or doing journalism about somebody in the public eye whose public statements were so inconsistent and so unreliable, and who had quite clearly either misremembered or re-embroidered, shall we say, key facts of his own biography? Did you have any idea how this was going to sort of take over your life? I mean, you've now not got access to certain publishing platforms, which as an investigative blogger must be horrendous. And I know you mentioned Charles Johnson earlier, the journalist from Got News, who's in a similar situation on Twitter. Did you have any idea this was going to sort of cut off your publishing access because effectively you started looking into the wrong person?
It kind of happened before with Benjamin Crump when I was doing a lot of blogging on the Trayvon Martin case. I kind of got a lot of like websites writing about me, saying I'm racist, and that's why, you know. And all I report are facts. I mean, I'm so careful not as careful as you were, but I'm pretty careful about what I report. So kind of, but not to this extent, not to where I was going to be permanently banned and wouldn't even be able to use the name of my blog site. You know, I mean, talk about shutting people up, you know.
Yeah, it's extraordinary, isn't it? And so if you pick the wrong targets, or if you pick the targets with the wrong politics, that somehow you can sort of start to lose your access to these essential publishing platforms because, you know, somebody has the wrong friend. That's remarkable, isn't it?
Yeah.
So talk to you just a little bit about your sort of what you've been reporting on more lately. So you've presumably followed the stories about King's financial disclosure. I know what I want to ask you about, actually. What's been most remarkable for me to watch hasn't so much been conservative journalists who, of course, would take natural pleasure from, you know, somebody from somebody in Black Lives Matter who isn't all they're cracked up to be. What's been remarkable to me, and I want to talk to Lee Stranahan about this, who's just joined us, and also to Sonny, who's on call as well, I think. But let me just ask you before you go, Vicky, about has it surprised you at all that some of the most vocal critics of King and some of the people who've been asking for answers have actually been Black Lives Matter supporters themselves? Because it seems to me that they're the ones who are really the angriest about this in a way.
And well, they should be, but they've been angry. Like I had put out something on Justice Together because I followed Shaun King's.
I'm just sorry to
I'm
interrupt.
sorry, Lee Stranahan.
Yeah, no, I'm just going to ask people to mute themselves if it's possible when they're not speaking, because we're just getting a little bit of echo. I think it's it's confusing the both of us. If that's possible, that would be phenomenal. These streams are a wonderful thing. Sort of enable anyone to put together a sort of phenomenal, almost like a sort of 2-hour TV discussion show. But there are occasionally little technological quirks and hiccups, and one of them is popping these on. So if people could do that, that would be super helpful. Sorry, Vicky. Yes.
But anyway, Justice Together. I had warned. I had even gone to the board members of Justice Together and said, look, he's got a past with like the Tamir Rice Foundation. The Tamir Rice donations, which he did with Ben Crump. That was a whole backhanded thing. And no one would listen. And so when Black Lives Matter, when we were watching that take place, when was it? The night before last. Netta admitted that board members had been coming to her behind the scenes asking. Meanwhile, Shaun King is free to continue with donation sites, continue to solicit through email, which he did. And so, yeah, I don't find a lot of courage in the way that was done, because he should have been stopped a long time ago. But I do want to make one thing clear. If you read my blogs about Shaun King, I don't think you will find anywhere, unless it's a reference to Black Lives Matter, that I've ever gone. This has never been about Black Lives Matter, because for one thing, he's not black, but it's never been about that. It's been about Shaun King. And, you know, the main thing, the worst thing that I think he's ever done is steal from $250,000, in my opinion, based on my research, from an orphanage in Haiti. You know, and so it's never been about Black Lives Matter, and people keep saying, oh, they want to shut down Black Lives Matter. Well, they're going to shut themselves down. I'm not concerned with them.
Well, we know that there are certainly allegations along those lines, and we've covered some of them in a piece on Breitbart, sort of 5 questions for Shaun King that have nothing to do with race. People can have a look into those.
Right.
As far as the Haiti orphanage goes, you know, we can't, we can't speak to that anymore on the stream today, but certainly things that other journalists are looking into and continue to look into. Vicky, your reporting on this has been absolutely invaluable, so thank you very much for joining us. I'm very
All right, thank you.
Thanks for
you, Milo,
for coming along.
Bye-bye.
And yeah, continue to do your good work. Thanks so much.
All right, thank you.
We're going to move on to one of Breitbart's experts in protest movements, Lee Stranahan. How are you doing, Lee?
I'm doing great, Milo. How are you?
I'm very well. And also, I want to say hello to Sonny Johnson, who is here as well. Sonny, are you able to hear us and have your microphone unmuted?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Hi, hello. So I thought the three of us could have a chat and put some of this in context. So Vicky's, who was the sort of impetus behind our original report about Shaun King's race controversy, isn't so much concerned with the politics of all of this. She just saw a public figure who was making extraordinary claims that didn't stack up to reality, and decided to look into his biography a bit more closely. And some of the things she's discovered have ended up being the subject of quite explosive news reports. But I'd like to put the race controversy now into a bit more context. And in the second hour, we'll be moving on to speak to Oliver Darcy from The Blaze, and we'll be speaking to Chuck Ross from The Daily Caller. We'll also be speaking to Alex Marlowe, who is the editor-in-chief of Breitbart.com, and I'll come back to Alan and Michael, who are on my research team. And Alan is a great writer at Breitbart Tech, who's done some good stuff in the last couple of days about this too. Let's first, as I say, put this in context. Lee, let me come to you first. Why does it matter whether Shaun King is black or white?
Well, you know, I mean, my take on this broadly is that the entire Black Lives Movement is based on lies. So,
can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, sure. Going up a level from Shaun King, the entire movement which started with Trayvon Martin, which was based on a story that was put out there incorrectly. When the Trayvon Martin case first came up, the perception was that Trayvon Martin was this little kid who had Skittles and he was shot execution style by a white guy. And every fact in that narrative was untrue. Then we went to the Mike Brown case. And again, there might be, whether you agree or disagree on the Trayvon Martin case, everything I just said was not accurate. Then you had the Mike Brown case where the whole thing, which, the Ferguson story, was also based on untruth, hands up, don't shoot, and that it left out the fact that Mike Brown had actually assaulted Officer Darren Wilson. Now, at a much higher level than that, you have to realize that the Black Lives Matter movement is just the latest incarnation and the most successful one of the activist wing of the left. This goes back to the 60s, this goes back to the Black Panthers, this goes back to Students for Democratic Society, this goes back to the Black Liberation Army, and the more mainstream versions of this. The direct antecedent is Occupy Wall Street. And the wider lie that it's based on is all the lies that the left are based on. The idea that a omnipotent state will somehow work out better for the people, power to the people. I'm DeRay, look at me. I'm missing a vest, but I'm doing the fist thing. And
he always seems to be in the same vest. Somebody told me the other day they were going to start a Kickstarter for him for new vests.
I really wanted to have a vest for this, but I don't own one.
I really wanted it. You see, in Britain we call it a gilet, which sounds much more exotic.
It does.
I have a wax gilet that I wear horse riding. We're supposed to just call it riding in Britain. I quite like the vest. I'm
not. But I'm just saying that the whole movement. There's a reason that socialism has to be based on lies. It's because every time it's been tried on a mass scale, it's led to huge piles of bodies, whether it's the Khmer Rouge or Russia or China or Cuba or any place that's been tried on a mass scale. And the people that have been killed are often minorities. Socialism is racist, and you can just see that. Anybody who studied history for a second can look at the disaster it's led to, not just economically, not just in terms of basic human rights, but in terms of literally piles of dead bodies, killing fields of skeletons of people that the Khmer Rouge killed because they had glasses, right? So
let me ask you a specific question.
Shaun King would have been killed right away.
Let me ask you a specific question about Black Lives Matter. Did it surprise you to find out that Shaun King had been, at best, economic with the truth about his past and his race? Does it surprise you that any of this stuff happens? I mean, it blew my mind. I'll be honest. Like I was got in touch with Vicky and reading this stuff, and I just thought, this can't be true. This is blowing my mind. Everything that we're told from the left about identity politics, the sort of black people speaking for other black people, like, this guy can't possibly be white. And then I started looking into it, and the case became unanswerable. And his own behaviour, of course, as anybody's been a journalist for a long time, you start to pick up on cues in behaviour that tell you that that people might not want to answer questions about certain subjects. Shaun King has all of that in spades, for sure. Did this story surprise you at all, or you've seen enough of this now that you've come to expect it?
I've seen enough of it now where it's not really surprising to me. As soon as you base the movement on identity politics, I mean, how would you trick the conservative movement in a way like this, right?
It's hard to imagine this happening on the right, I have to be honest. I mean, it's not like the conservatives don't have, their own issues, but it's hard to imagine something like this happening. Plagiarism and faking race and all those kinds of crimes, you don't really see them on the political right, do you?
When I first met Andrew Breitbart, I was on the left. I was a writer for Huffington Post. I'd done work for Move On, and I was on the left. And when I first talked to him in an interview, we ended up talking for 3 hours. And one of the things he said to me, he said, "It's a bigger tent on the right." And I said, "You're crazy." I said, "What are you talking about? What are you talking about?" He said, I know, it sounds weird. He said, but it's really true. It's a bigger tent. And then I was at CPAC that year with Andrew, walking around with Eddie Slaughter, who's a black farmer. I met David Webb, who's a black conservative. I met a number of people. I don't think I'd met Sonny there, but and Andrew co-sponsored the Go Proud party for gay Republicans. That was attended by all sorts of Republicans. And I'm suddenly like, yeah, this is kind of a bigger tent. Yeah, this is kind of a bigger tent. And so the identity politics thing doesn't work. Like right now, for instance, look, there's no advantage to me being on the left right now because I'm a straight white Christian. So that doesn't buy you anything on the left. Being black buys you something on the left. You can get on boards just because you're black. Being gay would buy you something now on the left.
I found that it's bought me a huge amount. I mean, you're not really supposed to say this, but no, you're not really supposed to say, but I get away with murder. I mean, nobody wants to write the stuff I write, and it's only because I'm gay. And in a way, I sort of think, well, this is wrong, and
yeah.
I should be calling this out. But by the same token, if it annoys the right people, then sure, if they want me to beat them on their own territory, I'll beat them there as well. But it's a remarkable thing. I want to bring Sonny in here. As a Black American, very politically engaged. How does this stuff make you feel when you see sort of supposed community leaders, of major influential black organizations? There seems to be something wrong with all of them. Like, what is going on with these left, these sort of leftist movements? You've got Rachel Dolezal in Washington, the NAACP, who turns out to be a white woman, and then when she admits she was born biologically white, she gets applauded on television rather than thrown out the studio. And then you've got Shaun King. I mean, how does this make you feel about how blacks are represented in America?
Oh, well, I don't think that there any kind of representation of blacks in America, first and foremost. And this is one of the reasons why I really adore Lee. Because Lee lays out the entire plan. And what the left wants us to do is they want us to focus on one event at a time, one Trayvon Martin at a time, one Mike Brown at a time, one Eric Garner at a time, instead of seeing the big picture and how we're being played in all of this. My big beef with Shaun King is simply this. He proves the lie. So I don't care what you say when you walk behind him, when you stand up for him, when you justify him. He proves the damn lie. This is not about black and white. This is about a political structure that wants to keep itself in place and will use black grievances to that purpose. And that is all they are. And with Shaun King, you have him who, while these protesters were out getting arrested, Shaun King was building a resume. While these protesters were out not going to work, not going to school, wasting precious time of their life, Shaun King was stacking money. While they were out getting arrested and building a record, Shaun King was getting a job at New York Daily. Mm-hmm. So Shaun King is a capitalist, but he preaches the bull, and that is what so infuriates me. It has nothing to do with his race. Is that you know the truth. You know how to make it in America. But rather than telling the truth about how to make it in America, you would rather peddle in lies.
That's really interesting, because it's something actually that Janetta Elsie, one of the Black Lives Matter's ringleaders, who goes by Netta, I can never remember how many A's is in it. It's Netta on Twitter. She said to him the same thing. It's this is a girl. I mean, she was on the front lines in Ferguson, right? I mean, she doesn't mess around. She's really out there, and whatever you think about her political objectives, she's down there in the trenches. And she said about Shaun King, he's only ever been a spectator at best, and some of his writing has been sensitive and it's drawn attention to important issues, but he's never really been on the front lines. It seems to me like there's been a lot of tension between Black Lives Matter leaders for quite some time now, between the Black Lives Matter leaders and Shaun King. It's a very interesting analysis, yours actually, Sonny, because you're basically saying that Shaun King is a successful product of precisely the sort of capitalist system that his leftist mates in Black Lives Matter want to tear down. But I want to drill down with you just briefly on, you mentioned the word grievance, and of course Shaun got caught out by an investigative reporter who come to me and said, "Do you want this?" And I said, "Yeah, of course, sure." And so I checked it out, and it turned out to be right. He's charging. He attempted to charge $7,500 to go and speak at a gender conference. I don't know if the gender conference was even real. I think the investigative guy made it up or just picked one at random. $7,500 plus hotel and travel and expenses, of course, to go and speak about gender issues. And it seems to me like something similar is happening with Black Lives Matter and perhaps with modern feminism, this grievance victimhood-based politics. Do you see it as a significant risk both to women and to black people, this sort of luxuriating in grievance and history, rather than, as you might say, Shaun King has done, taking the sort of American dream by the horns and and making a career out of writing or doing whatever it is that you're good at? This sort of luxuriating in grievance, the self-destructive behavior. How do you see that affecting communities that do need some help and do have some valid complaints?
That's it, and that's the whole point, that there are valid complaints, and those complaints go unheard. So when the voices come along that are louder, when the voices come along that are stronger, when the voices come along that have the backing of George Soros's money, which, if you ask me, is the underpinning of why all of this is coming apart right now. When they gave that initial funding to start Black Lives Matter, I think, what did they say, it was like a couple of $1 million. Everybody was getting paid, and you saw all of the activists. They were even tweeting about it. They were getting paid. They were basically letting you know that this was a paid protest. Now that money is starting to swing to Hillary because of the election. They can't lose 2016, and all that money is going to start flooding into Hillary's coffers. So that money is drying up in the Black Lives Matter movement. But guess who's still getting paid? Shaun King. And that's what black people are looking at. The black people that took him in and accepted him, their paychecks are running out. And Shaun King is still getting paid. Now, in their eyes, that's what they see as grievance. But as the overall population goes, this is our opportunity as conservatives. See, they see themselves as the talented 10th. Shaun King, him excluded. But the rest of the Black Lives Movement see themselves as the talented 10th. And they want to rule over the rest of the 90% of us black people. Well, that tells conservatives there are 90% of the black vote that is up for grabs. And they are tired of Shaun King, and they are tired of Black Lives Matter, not because of anything they've done specifically. They are tired because they can't get to work in the morning because Black Lives Matter has shut down the bridge. We have the opportunity to be the voice that sucks the vacuum out of Black Lives Matter, and I just hope we don't miss it. We can take down the Shauns of the world, but what are we replacing so that we can suck up that space within the vacuum?
It's so interesting that you should mention the. It's very, very rousing. Rousing. Thank you for sharing that with us, because it's very.
My bad. That's what I do.
No, you know what? It's so nice.
It's a black thing.
It's so nice and so bright.
So I can get away with because I'm black. We'll roll like that.
So I can get away with having a limp wrist. It's so interesting to hear people speak so forcefully and bravely in public, I guess, because I have this similar kind of thing with this leftist identity politics is poison. I'm told as a gay man that I'm supposed to believe in a certain set of political principles, and if I don't, I'm self-loathing. There's something wrong with me. I'm going to be pathologized, and that small 10% of gay people are hurting the rest of us. And it seems like you're saying something similar is happening with Black Lives Matter. Lee, I want to ask you, the black activists who have supported Shaun King, they've sort of stuck with him despite the controversies. They're just now starting to turn away, and many of them have donated money to him. They don't know if they're going to see that money again. He says he's going to refund it, but there have been claims for refunds in the past that haven't materialized. What should they do now? What's your advice as somebody who's followed Black Lives Matter and protest movements and understands sort of how they operate, how people operate in groups, if you like? What should they do?
Okay, so there's what they should do, but let's talk about what they're going to do. Let's talk about that. Because here's what they're not going to do. they're not going to suddenly go, oh my gosh, you know what? I think capitalism is awesome, and I think Thomas Sowell and Walter Williams are the black people I should be listening to, and on and on. They're not going to do that. Why aren't they going to do that? Because Republicans don't show up. I was just in Chicago covering the Black Lives Matter shutdown over Laquan McDonald of Michigan Avenue. And I'm going to... Conservatives, Republicans, Sonny can back me on this, don't show up in the black community. There is, if there's a racism, it's not that Republicans hate black folks. It's that they don't think there's any possibility that black folks will ever listen, and then therefore they don't show up. And then because they don't show up, but I'll tell you who does show up: communists show up.
Yep.
The revolutionary. The revolutionary exactly right. They show up. And here's the thing: if you're black and you see you're being screwed by the establishment Democrats, and then you look around and somebody's going, "Yeah, you are being screwed by the establishment Democrats," you're willing to listen. And then they say, "Yeah, Rahm Emanuel, he's screwing you over. He's a bad guy." And then you go, "Okay, tell me more." And they say, "What you need to do is adopt Marxism, because no, that white guy, Karl Marx, he's the white guy you can trust. Trust him." Oh, no, but no, let's not talk about Karl Marx. You know, let's talk about the Angela Davis, who was trained under Herbert Marcuse, another white guy. That Herbert Marcuse was Angela's mentor. She went to study with him at Brandeis. She met him at Brandeis, and she went to UCSD. And Angela Davis, people don't talk about this, actually studied at the Frankfurt School in Germany. By the way, pretty white place. And so Angela's trained by all these white guys. But what happens is no Republicans show up to the black community to say, "Hey, look, what we've noticed is a lot of black folks are actually industrious, are able to take nothing and build it into something."
Entrepreneurial,
right?
As you
Free.
Entrepreneurial.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, right, but you know, and also there's a thing. Let me just speak as a black man for a second. There's a thing in black culture.
Well, so many people in public life are coming out as trans.
I'm identifying as black.
I see no reason to deny you the same privilege. So go right ahead.
But Sonny can tell me if I'm wrong in this. There's a thing in black culture where they look at it's. Black folks do it explicitly, white folks don't really do it, where they talk about things in life as a game, like the rap game, for instance, or you'll hear Ice-T talk about the pimp game, for instance, but they view it, and it's a very interesting metaphor to look at life as a game. You actually see that in the tech world, people who are looking at gamifying certain things, but black folks have been doing it forever. And so what Sonny was talking about was Shaun King figured out the left game. Right? There's a game. In other words, what you lose, you look at it, you just go, "Oh, I see, it's a game. There's certain rules. If I play by those rules, I'll be successful. And that means I'm going to do certain things and not do other things." A lot of these folks, Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, learned the left game a long time ago. And what Sonny pointed out to me on a radio show we were doing a few weeks ago, and she was completely right, and I've really noticed it ever since she brought it up, was that Black Lives Matter is explicitly trying to push out Jackson, Sharpton, and that level of leadership and replace it with this new group of people who are younger, by and large queer, right? All the three founders of Black Lives Matter self-identify as queer: Patrisse Cullors, Opal Tometi, and Alicia Garza. And so in any of those women, you have three oppressed classes in one. They're a woman, they're black, and they're queer, right? Oh, look at that! It's like an identity politics trifecta. If they were crippled and spoke Spanish, you know, you run the table. And so
sort of the paraplegic Armenian lesbian of legend. Let me ask Sonny something, if you don't mind, because we're just coming to getting towards the end of our first hour. So I just want to get a couple of questions I had in to all of this, and it's about. Since we think we've pretty much established the facts of this case, and of course Shaun King did confirm all of the facts of our story in his explanation, which he threw his mum under the bus. Sonny, I want to ask you something, and it's how people respond to you as a black woman who doesn't have the correct opinions. You don't have the politically correct sort of establishment prescribed opinions, and I've seen whether it's Lauren Southern, the Canadian libertarian politician who objects to the excesses of modern feminism, or we with the homosexual lobby, a peculiar, special, and really quite vile response to people who don't play the identity politics game and who don't sort of vote with their body parts and vote with their skin color. What's it been like for you as a very vocal and passionate, politically engaged black woman not signing up to the things you're supposed to sign up to?
I lost a few family, a few friends, but hey, that's the way it works. But outside of my family and my friends and the people that are close to me, I don't catch the flack that a lot of other black conservatives catch, because I don't fit the Uncle Tom stereotype. I don't fit the mold of what they refer to as an Uncle Tom. So like, they don't come to me and question my blackness. They don't come to me and question my loyalty to my race. They don't come to me and question me on any of that. They actually steer clear of me. Like, the black people don't want to interview me. They don't want to bring me on. They don't want to have an honest discussion with me. They don't, because I'm not going to jump to race. I'm not going to play the game. I'm not going to say that you're on a Democrat plantation. I'm not going to say the stupid stuff that so many black conservatives say that get them nowhere. So they're afraid. They don't talk to me. And that's what I have noticed, that's how they want to keep us out. They want to keep us out by not speaking to us. Now, if they can find them a good Uncle Tom, then they'll have no problem talking to the Uncle Tom. But they don't want to let this new voice of young black conservatives anywhere near black people. And that's why it is so important that the conservative movement recognize that and start letting young black voices combat these new black voices. Just like Lee said, they are building their next generation of leaders, and it is time that we do the same. But first, we have to acknowledge that the current black conservative leadership that we have is failing.
That's fascinating. Lee, what's your perspective on that? And you know, when young black people are looking out and looking for answers, and many of them have perfectly valid grievances about the communities in which they live, mainly because they're run by Democrats. What advice would you give young black people when they're looking for role models? And what's your assessment of the current field of role models for young black kids in America, many of whom are, you know, looking for answers, looking for a way out of sometimes you know, of challenging socioeconomic circumstances?
Well, I mean, I tell people all the time that you know what, a lot of conservatives, unfortunately, seem to feel like conservatism is something you're born with, right? And that's probably because they grew up in a place where everyone they knew was conservative. And I grew up in Massachusetts and I moved to LA, and those are not conservative places. And I try to tell people, like, I'm like, look, if you grew up in Detroit and you're black, tell me who your conservative role models would be who you saw. You didn't see anybody. So why would you be conservative? It would never occur to you. I mean, there are black folks.
No. Their conservative role models are their grandmother who pays the rent on time, makes sure the food is in. But it's not marked as conservatism. We haven't asserted the definition of what we are and who we are. It's not about just pulling yourself up by their bootstraps. Most blacks already have themselves up. It's about having a power of understanding that economic power that you do have is what makes you able to play an American game. We haven't delivered our message so that they see how they live their life every day is conservatism.
Yeah, no, and I agree completely. That's the problem. Like I say, it's so infuriating. Well, I was doing some work for the Black Conservatives Fund back a year ago in Louisiana, and we were going into black neighborhoods, and people in the neighborhoods were saying they'd never seen a Republican politician show up in that neighborhood ever. Ever. The Republicans had never shown up. And so what's happened is the Democrats have done nothing. I mean, if you look at how Obama's been in terms of providing jobs, anything for black folks. It's crime, anything. It's all worse. And so he doesn't have that achievement. Therefore, you have to go to white supremacy and everything else. It's a distraction game. Oh, don't look over here at the bad employment. Look over here. It's white supremacy. And that's why Obama's implicit, from the bully pulpit, helped push the Black Lives Matter movement. But I have a big story coming out that's very, very close on the white architect, Eric Mann, of the Black Lives Matter movement. And that story goes into detail about how the left's, and this, people really need to understand this, the left's plan from Herbert Marcuse, father of the New Left, through Eric Mann, and Eric Mann is the one who trained Patrisse Cullors, one of the founders of Black Lives Matter. Their plan has been, the communist and the anarchist, has been to start a communist revolution by using black folks as the muscle, by using inner city black folks. Marcuse talks about in the essay on liberation. He talks about rising up from the ghetto. All the SDS people, they talked about it. Helter Skelter, Charles Manson's Helter Skelter, was about trying to start a race war. And the idea is, it comes from Mao and the Vietnamese, Ho Chi Minh. They saw that the people rose up and started a revolution and overthrew things. They saw it in Cuba, too. So they're trying, literally, these white liberals who are running things want to use black folks as muscle to start a revolution. That's why they're doing the prison, the mass incarceration agenda, which is a big part of Black Lives Matter movement. That's why Obama wants to let people out of prison. And I go into great detail in all this in this story, but it's really important for people to understand what's going on. People don't get what's going on. That's why whatever happens to Shaun King, the movement goes on.
The movement goes on, and that's what. And yep. Since me and Lee first met, Lee was one of the first. I was like, bingo, like he gets it. They're trying to get black people riled up. They're trying to get black people mad. They're trying to send black people out in the streets. And black people will be the first mowed down. They will be wiped out.
That's right.
And they will be exterminated. And that is the white progressive plan all along. Black people, the reason they haven't told you what happens after the revolution is because you don't make it to after the revolution. You go with the first group of people that are mowed down. They are setting you up for it, and you're walking into it with anger and ignorance. You are letting your emotions overpower your intelligence, and until we put a stop to it, we are going to continue to see American cities burn, and the only thing that can fill the vacuum is conservatives showing up in this area and showing them that there is a better way.
And if I just may point out, the reason I get that is because I am down and have been down from day one. Free the land.
Maybe the most based stream ever. Some in the comments will know what that means. Sonny, let me ask you. We're going to wrap up this first hour. We're going to have Oliver Darcy from the Blaze on soon. We're going to have Chuck Ross, who's traveling between airports. I think he's on his way to DC for the Daily Caller Christmas party. He's going to try and phone in from the airport. So we're going to see if we can get 20 minutes with him, because he did some great reporting about the financial scandal surrounding Shaun King. Before we both go, so I ask you a question each. Sonny, Shaun King uses the N-word a lot. He uses it all the time. He uses it on Twitter. He got special permission from the New York Daily News to use it endlessly in a column. He's a white guy. Does that offend you?
No, I don't care about words. I care about people who want to take my words away. I am a free speech advocate. To any speech, I say more speech is negative. So if Shaun King wants to meet a nigger, here go a nigger. How about that?
Excellent. And Lee, let me ask you about Shaun King on gun control. And we're going to get into this a little bit more in the second hour, but I'm mystified by this. So Shaun King he lost a job at Morehouse College for brandishing a weapon. He has in the past tweeted proudly about the guns he's owned, the guns he's fired, and then he went on this weird rant the other day, which was very widely reported on, about how guns in America are driven by white supremacy, and white supremacy is, it runs through American society. It's responsible for effeminate European depictions of Jesus and the game of pool. Where is all this coming from? I mean, it seems to me like talk me through a little bit about this, sort of Shaun King's sort of gun renaissance. Because let me speculate. So I don't want to frame your answer too much, but you talk very often in terms of politics and in terms of socialism and communism and the effect that's having on black movements. And for some people that can sound a slightly abrupt leap until you look into the language that's used by some of these activists, and you see that Shaun King wants to be paid $7,500 to talk about gender. Why? Because it's another one of those subjects. And then his sort of weird Damascene conversion on gun control. What's going on there?
Well, the reason people, Sonny talked about people using the plantation. There is a liberal plantation, but the problem is it's a rainbow. Everybody's on it. And the plantation is that you're not allowed to go outside the narrative. So the current narrative coming from on high, from Barack Obama, is gun control. So Shaun King has to be pro-gun control. You talk about blacks and gun control, tell that to Huey P. Newton, right? I mean, the thing was, I tell that to Malcolm. Tell that to Malcolm X. The 60s black movement, the Black Panthers, very specifically, were about black folks having guns, and there was actually a justification for it in that case. Because if you were black in the South in the 50s, let's say, and the Klan was there, I'm in favor of you having guns. I'm in favor
you should
of
be able to protect yourself in that circumstance, right?
You're damn right. You're damn right. And actually the gun control laws were to keep the guns out of the hands of black folks. And so Shaun King has to do that for the same reason you're not allowed to be pro-life if you're on the left and you're black, even though abortion's a huge problem in the black community, much higher abortion rates. And creates and there's a ripple effect on it, because basically if you have an abortion rate that's as high as it is in the black community, I think it clearly directly it makes you lose respect for life broadly. And I think the abortion,
if they can convince you to kill your baby,
that's right.
If they can convince you to kill the life inside yourself, seeing the black on black crime statistics aren't going to shock you. It's not going to jump you into moving or make you into, if they can convince you the life within your own body doesn't matter, then they've got you. And when you have places now like New York that can brag about more black babies aborted than were actually born, you can see the progressive hole in the black community. And it is sickening to its very core.
Word them up.
Thank you very much, both of you. It's been absolutely fascinating to hear from a black American woman who feels so passionately about, free speech and conservative issues. I've loved having you, Sonny. Thank you so much. We hadn't actually met.
I love you, Sonny. I love you.
I can see that this is. Oh, there we go. We got a little glimpse of you there. I can.
I'll do better next time. I'm sorry.
There we go. We finally saw you. I'm gonna give. There we are.
I like it. Oh, look at a tree. Wait, go back.
A beautiful Christmas tree. We never got to see you for the whole stream. How about that?
Everybody.
Thank you so much for being with us, Sonny. It's been absolutely so fascinating, so interesting. So thank you. And Lee, as ever, you are one of Breitbart's leading experts on these movements. And so thank you for coming over and sharing your expertise and your insight with us. Thank you so much. This video will be up on Breitbart.com when we finish in about an hour's time. So we're going to move on to the second hour of the show, and after that sort of big picture contextual stuff and into some of the more recent nitty-gritty. And to help me navigate the weird waters of Shaun King's email account, I want to welcome on Oliver Darcy. Hello, Oliver.
Hey, what's going on, Milo? Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're welcome. So tell everybody, you're at the Blaze, aren't you? Just tell everybody briefly about yourself and what you do. And then I have some questions for you about emails we've been receiving recently.
Right, so I work at the Blaze. I'm online at the night. I'm during the night shift, and I've been covering, I can't remember exactly. I think a piece by Chuck Ross got me kind of interested in the Shaun King sort of controversies, and I followed up on one of the things that he did, and ever since I've been kind of tracking it for the Blaze. So, as of recent, it's got a little more bizarre.
It has, hasn't it? So, I mean, I think most people watching this will have read this, but in case they haven't, I've received the most remarkable email from Shaun King after having asked why he was deleting so many Twitter followers. Now, we just heard a moment ago about what from Lee why he might have had a sort of Damascene conversion on gun control. When it was pointed out to him by a lawyer, Mike Cernovich, on Twitter, that this wasn't entirely in keeping with some of his previous statements on the subject, he began not just deleting the tweets in question, but deleting his entire Twitter history, 70,000 tweets. Now, tell us, Oliver, when I emailed him, this is my email, so I know this, but I'd like you to explain it. When I emailed Shaun King to ask how he was achieving this mass deletion, what did he say?
So I haven't even told you this. When I first saw the email, I think I was on Twitter and I saw you tweeted out. I clicked on the story and then I read it and I thought maybe Milo is just being sarcastic here, like, is this some sort of like parody Shaun King email thing? And then I realized you had the screenshot and I was like, no, I think he's being serious. I think he
That's a reasonable supposition. I am prone to satire from time to time, but
right. So I wasn't quite sure if you're just joking or if I missed something, and this is some sort of like parody of his email. And so I clicked on it, and I read it, and I was like, this is very, very bizarre. It said something. So you had asked him. You said, we are just interested in why you're deleting thousands and thousands of tweets from your account. Is it because you're embarrassed about this firearm incident? Where he had attacked people for having firearms, and then people had gone through his Twitter and revealed that he was a big firearm enthusiast himself. And so you had asked him, are you deleting your tweets to hide your history because of this? And he said something like, we have thousands and thousands of people worldwide deleting 1 to 2 to 3, I think, Shaun King emails like a day.
His claim basically is that you have to be so careful, because I live in England, right? So you guys can be a bit freer about what you can say about people. I live in England, and we have such strict libel and defamation laws. You can't just go calling people a liar. So what we have to do is to describe what's happened and let readers kind of make up their own judgments. I'm so sorry. It's not like that. There we go. Live stream happenings. This is what happens. You have to sort of let readers make up their own judgments, and you can paint a picture about the likely credibility of a person based on sort of the claims that they make on relatively minor subjects. Now, Shaun King's claim is that volunteers from 150 companies were logged into his account, deleting 70,000 tweets manually, and that this didn't somehow trigger what my friend at Twitter tells me is a very aggressive system to check, for a fraud system that Twitter has, for multiple sign-in, security system. That somehow Shaun King's account was exempt from these usual security procedures at Twitter, and that he was able to delete 70,000 tweets with the help of volunteers from 150 countries. Now, wouldn't this make Shaun King's volunteer army the largest in the world?
It would certainly do that. And he said, he affirmed, I'm reading the email right now, he said, quote, it's all manual. We gave Shaun King's Twitter password to the volunteers and asked them to do it all by the end of the day today.
So, I mean, for those viewers who don't know, who don't realize, far more likely a situation when somebody deletes a huge number of followers is that they have instead been using an automatic tool to do that. Now, these tools are technically against Twitter's terms of service, so this is maybe one reason why another explanation could be given. Now, tell us about the emails you started receiving when you asked Shaun King about the emails he'd sent, because the email he sent me was crazy. I mean, he was talking about the game of pool being a white supremacy, and he said, I pointed out that the number of children he claims to have seems to alter every 3 months. He sort of loses a kid here, picks up another one there. It's it's difficult to keep track of how many children Shaun King has. He's a public figure, and we try to do these things. And so the email said, is it because you'd be a terrible parent that you're instead obsessed with Shaun King's children? And that's the point at which I knew I had to publish it. But what did the email say? Go ahead.
You also said you're strangely obsessed with him.
Well, I shouldn't make this joke because we're in a very sensible, grown-up, and respectable stream. But the only reason I know Shaun King's white is because when I saw him, I didn't want to fuck him. There's no risk of me being obsessed with Shaun King at all, I'm afraid. But tell us about what the emails said that you received shortly afterwards?
So I emailed him. I saw the email you got, and I was like very baffled. And I messaged you and I said, Milo, is this legit? Like, just to triple check, like you're not pulling anyone's strings here. This is an actual legit email. And you like assured me it's legit. And I think even asked you to forward a copy of it to me. So I got the email, and so I'm like, okay, this is really weird. So I decided I'm going to email Shaun King and ask him, if he was what was going on. Is this a serious email? Like, was he hacked? What happened exactly? And so I got a response. It's not exactly. He says he didn't write it, but it's coming from his email. It says, quote, like, Shaun King didn't write the email, but it was very serious. It was very accurate. And then he accused me. He said the Blaze is a modern publication for white supremacy, and he accused me of being a neo-Klansman.
And he had nice things to say about Glenn Beck, I seem to remember.
He did, and so he went on. So that was the first email I got, okay, and then the email was followed up by another unsolicited email, I believe, and he said Shaun was a huge Glenn Beck fan. Quote, like, he couldn't believe that you never found the dozens of tweets he wrote praising him. More than any tweets we had volunteers delete. It was the Glenn Beck tweets that truly hurt Shaun.
Wow.
And then he goes on, quote, I very literally think Shaun cried this afternoon over deleting his beloved Glenn Beck tweets. They were so special to Shaun.
So this is the point at which you messaged me and you said something else is going on here, something's up.
Correct.
But this is coming from his official email account. I mean, we've verified this. I mean, what is, in your view, what's going on? Because Shaun is having, a sort of a public relations meltdown. He's being, he must see which way the wind is blowing. This is a few days before the rest of the Black Lives Matter sort of leadership start effectively kicking him out of the movement. Things are sort of coming down all around him. What do you think is happening? What's going on behind the scenes? These sort of.
So I came up with a few options of what could be actually taking place. So
yeah,
one is that this is, he was just maybe, it was late at night and he decided he was going to troll us, and so he just were sending out these very, very, very bizarre emails as a joke. That's, I guess, a certain possibility. Another is that there may be serious. Like, this is not terribly out of character for Shaun King. The other day, a few days beforehand, he had accused any gun owners of having small genitals and compensating.
That's not his exact wording, but you're being a
right.
consummate gentleman, so sure.
He was a little more explicit than I was, and so he had gone on a rant about this. Like, it wasn't just one tweet, it wasn't two, it wasn't three. It was a online Twitter rant about gun owners and why they might decide to purchase a firearm. So this is not something like. He
says this is like a white man's problem. Right. I mean, I hate to be indelicate. Is he worried about himself?
We unfortunately we can't get him on the phone or on email.
We did invite him. We did invite him to the stream, of course, at your urging and at my. Obviously, I wanted to. We couldn't get him, but I'm sorry. You carry on. And so after I got these emails, right, and so one of them actually almost took like a racial jab at me. He sent me an old picture of myself, and he's like, "Are you like ashamed of like your racial heritage?" It was something to that extent, and like it looks like you're trying to hide like your ethnicity. And I was like, in your recent photos, I'm like, not really, but I didn't respond to that. And so anyway, so I'm like, okay, maybe he's hacked here, and someone malicious and nefarious is trying to make him look bad, which would be unfair for us to publish these emails without giving him a good chance to respond. So the next day I contacted the New York Daily News editor, Jim Rich, and I contacted the New York Daily News spokesperson, and I sent them multiple emails requesting comment throughout the day, from the morning till I think around 5 p.m. end of the workday. And I didn't hear back. They basically did not comment. We sent Shaun King emails. Shaun King's never responded, other than these weird, bizarre things that he decided to send us that one time. And so I would imagine if I were hacked, that I was sending these bizarre emails, I would probably go out using my public platform and say, these are not legitimate emails. I did not send these. I was hacked. I can't say more, maybe because authorities are investigating, but these are. I just want you to know these are not real. He's never denied them being real. They've come from his legitimate Twitter account where he had actually told people to contact him before, and it's an actual Twitter account. This is his email account. I don't know what to say. I don't know exactly what happened. My best guess is that he was maybe
just trolling us very late at night and deciding to send these bizarre things. I don't think it was terribly funny. And I think for a serious journalist or columnist, at the New York Daily News, a senior columnist there, he should probably hold himself to a higher standard. But I don't. I mean, in one email, I'll just say he accused me, quote, "You tried to assassinate him, Oliver. We believe you are flying drones over his house and at his wife's job."
I mean, this stuff is like really off the wall in places, isn't it?
I couldn't think of this stuff. I'd have to have a few drinks, and I probably still couldn't think of some of this stuff.
I know this is an overused line, but I'm a satirist. I couldn't make it up. Some of it's completely off the wall. I'm confused about all this because this is a guy who is supposedly one of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, or if he's now, well, we're going to get to this bit of the story in a second. Hopefully, Chuck Ross and Daily Caller will join us soon. This guy's supposed to be sort of, voice of a generation, former Facebook pastor, somebody who's raised hundreds of thousands of dollars by his own estimation for good causes, and he seems to be treating his own reputation, which is the basis on which he can raise all this money, with just sort of weird, wild, reckless abandon. It's a very bizarre thing, isn't it? I mean, I'm just trying to work it out. So I'm trying to get guys like you on to help me through this because I've never seen anything like it in my whole journalistic career.
And you being in the UK, I don't want you to think this is the way most Americans behave because.
Right. I'm thinking, my God, I've started working for Breitbart. I've been here.
Thinking the US is going to hell.
Everyone seems so nice, all my colleagues are lovely, and then suddenly I'm like, is this what your country is like? It's terrifying.
Right. No, this is a very bizarre behavior. I've never really seen anything quite like it. And it gets more bizarre. Like so now, he deleted a whole bunch of tweets, right? And now then after what we'll talk about coming up, I guess. After he was excommunicated from Black Lives Matter, the movement by the leaders, he just wiped his entire account clean. So now there's no record of anything he's really said, other than the archive versions and things that I've screen grabbed and you've probably screen grabbed. But it's very, very. I can't really find the word to describe it. It's very, very bizarre behavior. There's no real answer, and the New York Daily News is still silent. Maybe I'll try sending them an email again, but my gut is that they just don't really care. Or they've lost entire control over him and they don't want to admit it. Again, no idea what's going on at the Daily News, but he's their senior columnist.
Let's just let's just review that for a second because the New York Daily News is a supposedly respectable publication,
right?
Employing him as a senior journalist. I mean, this guy describes himself as a senior justice writer.
And so it was controversial when they first just brought him on, when he was seemingly like a more I don't know what the word would be.
They hired him after the race scandal. I mean, they hired him after most of America knew that he'd been misrepresenting his race, but they did it anyway. This new stuff just seems extraordinary to me that they would continue to stick with somebody who's. I mean, look, our primary currency as journalists is trust, right? And we have to maintain trust with our readers. They have to believe what we say. King has got such a long history of saying the most bizarre and extraordinary and remarkable things that just don't add up, making claims that don't stack up. And then, this sort of weird behavior, it looks like, who knows what it looks like? It looks like incredibly weird, guilty behavior. How can they continue to employ him? I mean, what's your prediction here? Where do you think this is going to go?
I don't know how they continue. And I told you this. I don't know how they continue to have him on staff after these latest things. Right? So we have these really bizarre emails that were sent to us, which just can't make the publication look good. But then, and we'll talk about this. He was excommunicated from the Black Lives Matter movement by the leading figures in the movement, and so now he's kind of lost standing. I think to some extent. To talk, he's not like an insider. Like the New York Daily News, I think they kind of hired him as an insider into the Black Lives Matter movement, and that he was going to talk about racial justice and things like that as someone who had been one of the leading figures. And now he can no longer, I don't think, claim to be a leading figure of the movement, considering all the, all the leaders have excommunicated him.
I've been sent a picture of the gun, which is Shaun King's second gun, a .380. This is the gun that he was proud of possessing.
Right.
probably the smallest. It's the smallest bit of weaponry I've ever seen in my life. This is one of the ones he was supposedly proud of owning before he deleted not just the tweets that referred to that gun, but all of the others as well. What a remarkable story this is. So let's move on a little bit. Now Chuck Ross, the Daily Caller, is going to hopefully join us from an airport somewhere. I think he's in transit between different stops. But let's talk briefly, because I know that you followed this story, and I know that you know something about this. What is it that drove DeRay Mackison and Jonetta Elsie, the two sort of primary frontlines ringleaders of Black Lives Matter? What is it that drove them to excommunicate Shaun King this week? Because this is the main topic of conversation for the second hour of our stream. This is the story that sort of kicked all of the discussion that we're having off now and all the sort of follow-up reporting. It's an extraordinary moment, which almost never happens on the political left, of two leaders of a civil rights movement throwing another one under the bus and effectively distancing themselves, with Jonetta Elsie making allusions to Shaun King's race controversy by putting the N-word in brackets, in inverted commas, or rather, and DeRay saying that he can't vouch for this guy anymore. Talk us through the events of the last perhaps couple of weeks that led to this sort of extraordinary break in Black Lives Matter.
So, well, it's even more than the last couple of weeks. There have always been. So Shaun King, for those who don't know, he has a history of starting these sort of fundraisers and charities, and there's a history of people who are involved in these fundraisers and charities who start questioning where the money has gone and exactly like how that's been distributed. And so this is nothing new. It's followed Shaun King for a while, but he started a particular, I guess it's a charity, right? Justice Together, aimed at promoting racial justice throughout America. And I can't remember exactly when it was, but there was a letter that was authored, a public letter from board members who were not happy with the transparency that Shaun King had demonstrated, and there were questions about where the money again had been going. And so DeRay Mackison, who is one of the leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement, I would probably say the most prominent figure in the movement, he had apparently what he said on Twitter is a question Shaun King, asking them these questions, where's the money going, where's the transparency, and he had not received satisfactory answers after repeated attempts to get them. And so he was not happy about that, and Shaun King then took a slight jab at DeRay Mackison and Jonetta by saying that they were, he was not interested in photo ops, and they had those two had been at the White House, or not the White House, but was meeting with the Attorney General and others, and so it was a slight jab, and that kind of unleashed DeRay Mackison to go after Shaun King over these donations and whatnot, and that's kind of what triggered it, and then it really took off on its own. That makes sense. It's kind of confusing.
It is very confusing. So some of the tweets were great, not just from the Black Lives Matter leaders, but also from Black Twitter, what we call Black Twitter. So Black Twitter is sort of a catch-all term for a particularly sort of colourful and boisterous set of Twitter users who seem to have rounded on King themselves. And we touched a little on this in the first hour, but I want to ask you about it too. The people who seem most angry, at last, you might say, with Shaun King are his own supporters and donors, and people from the Black Lives Matter movement, people who donated to Justice Together. And I asked Lee Stranahan the same question I'll ask you. What should people do who are frustrated with not getting answers from Shaun about money they donated? He doesn't seem to respond to anybody, blocks people on Twitter for asking questions, publishes these long 2,000-word self-justifying Facebook blog posts. There are a lot of black activists who have questions now about work they put in and money they donated. What should these people do?
Well, I'm not really terribly in position to advise activists, but I think one of the things that they did do en masse in the past few days is they've unfollowed him on Twitter. That's one, just taking away his platform, right? So if he doesn't have this platform, if the tree falls in the middle of the forest and no one hears it, then does it really make a noise? And so Shaun King, if he loses his platform, that's probably a big problem for him. And so he's been, I don't know the exact figure, but I'm pretty sure over 1,000, maybe more, have unfollowed him on Twitter. And I think so. That's one thing. I think people may be concerned and upset with him could do. But other thing is just talking to journalists. I think you and I have been particularly trying to reach out to members of the Black Lives Matter movement to talk to them about Shaun King, and before we had been sort of just attacked. We had been attacked really by these guys who had defended Shaun King in the past, but now that they maybe see some of the discrepancies in what he's done, if they're open to talking to journalists, that would be a big start, and just relaying their sort of experience dealing with King.
Yeah, unfortunately, we just had word that Chuck's not going to be able to join us, so we should talk about his reporting anyway. We've talked a little about yours. So Chuck is he's in an airport somewhere, and unfortunately can't make it. But we both read this piece by Chuck about charities that Shaun King set up that appear never to have existed. And now we know that the latest one, Justice Together, is being shut down, and Shaun says he's going to return the money, but nobody really knows if that will happen. I suppose what I want to ask you, and it's a slightly politically loaded question, but what I want to ask you is, how has somebody like Shaun King managed to get away with this for so long? And why do you think that, I mean, a public figure sending emails like this is quite an extraordinary thing. Why do you think the mainstream media just refuse to report on issues like crazy emails coming from a very influential leader of perhaps the most significant civil rights, or protest movement, in the West? Why does nobody want to know this stuff? Because although they wanted to know about the race stuff, when I broke the story about race, and they thought they had Rachel Dolezal 2.0 on their hands, they were very happy to run stories, sort of gleefully exposing him for a while. But in a way, the finance stuff matters more, because it's the finance stuff and it's the time and the money, the paychecks of the black people he's supposedly representing that have gone into his back pocket, and the allegations are from those same activists that they've gone into his back pocket and never emerged again. I care less, frankly, about whether this person is black or white, though I certainly find it illuminating, and it's important for the public to know if he's been lying about his race. But what is completely unacceptable is the lack of transparency when thousands of people are asking him, where's the money, Shaun? Why isn't the media reporting on this? Can you shed some light on why you think this is happening?
That's the bizarre thing. I mean, I have no idea. I've reached out to people who do. I would imagine this would be a big story if I were a media reporter and a huge figure in the media was sending bizarre, absolutely bizarre emails to other reporters who had just asked straight questions. I would say that's a pretty big story, and I don't understand why that it doesn't make any sense. I don't understand why the media won't cover it. Other than you and I think we were among the only individuals who actually published stories on this, and maybe a few other smaller, conservative-leaning websites did. But where are the political reporters at CNN or Politico or even the New York Times? Where are they? They have these. These publications have actual reporters who report on things going on in the media, and I would say this was probably the biggest story that day about a leading media figure sending out weird emails, and to add to it, he's not only a leading media figure, he's a leading Black Lives Matter organizer. So
and one who is currently being asked by hundreds of people online and thousands of people altogether across the various networks where their money is. I mean, it's inconceivable to me that a journalist for a major publication, which for all of its political weirdnesses, the New York Daily News is a major publication, how they can continue to employ a journalist. These are the people we entrust, telling the truth to us and interpreting the world for us, right? It's the other thing to remember. Journalists rely on other journalists. I don't know about sports, but if I did want to know about sports, I would read under a reputable masthead and expect to be told the truth. Whether I can tell what somebody's opinion is, but I want to know that the facts that I'm reading are accurate. I want to know what the score was and have faith that that's the real score and that's what happened. Shaun's writing on a more nebulous subject. He's writing on a more difficult subject. He's writing on a subject where there's so many grey areas and so many conspiracy theories floating around, which he has in the past been responsible for propagating too, by the way, and never really is never held to account for. Whether it's what happened in police custody. You know, he'll sort of gin people up, as we heard earlier from Sonny. You know, he's part of this sort of liberal establishment that will gin people up and then just suddenly go silent if it ever comes out that what they were saying is not true. He's done this. There are, if you believe Sonny and if you believe Vicky Pate, the investigative blogger we had on at the beginning of the show, if you believe them and some of the activists, there are hundreds of thousands of dollars unaccounted for. That's before we even get into the question of whether Shaun King has represented himself accurately, who he is racially. Questions about, you know, his surgeries, the stories about that change every month. The number of kids he has changes from you know, 6 month to 6 month period. I'm trying to wrap my head around how an establishment media organization can protect somebody like this, and how broken our priorities, you know, narrative over fact priorities have to be in order to continue to protect somebody just because of his skin color and his politics. And it seems to me that some of the same things that led to the publication of the Rolling Stone story about a rape case that almost certainly never happened, the Duke Lacrosse case, you know, all these various other sort of narrative over fact stories that pop up in liberal media. It seems to me that some of the same thing is going on behind the scenes too, which is why so many of the plagiarism scandals are on the left. It seems to me that people think he's valuable because he's telling important stories, even if he as a human being is, you know, almost tip-to-toe fraud. I find that astonishing and unprecedented on the political right, whatever else you may think about the right's priorities and style. I've never seen anything like it on the right. It's absolutely remarkable, and I can't think of a precedent. Can you?
No, not. I mean, there are like we've talked about. There are so many bizarre elements to Shaun King. It doesn't. We don't have anything to compare it really to. I don't know. There's just we've documented a lot of things that just don't add up, and you don't have to necessarily believe me, and you don't. No one has to believe you. Look what leaders of the Black Lives Matter movement said. Janetta, I think, said something to the extent of nothing about Shaun King adds up.
Mm-hmm.
Those are her words. You know, it's not me, it's not you, and they have access to him. That leads me to believe that they had asked some hard questions. You know, probably based on some of our reporting, and he hadn't given them satisfactory answers, and that's bizarre. And so for the New York Daily News to kind of cover for him and continue to give him a platform is strange, and I can even maybe understand if they would come out and offer an explanation as to why, but to just kind of give us the cold shoulder, not explain why they haven't addressed any of these things, it doesn't make any sense. And again, they give this guy a very prominent sort of platform. The New York Daily News is one of the top, I think, 50 websites in the United States. It's one of the top tabloids in New York City, obviously, and it's very well read. So the fact that he has this ability to publish, you know, really whatever it seems like on there, while having these inconsistencies in his own life, and then behaving in a very strange manner, doesn't add up. And like I told you, I think if someone comparable, let's say like a conservative columnist, let's say Rich Lowry at the National Review, a much smaller publication probably than the New York Daily News, if he had done one of these things, like just sending out bizarre emails like we got to a liberal,
one of these things, any one of these things,
it would be a big scandal. The headlines would read National Review editor melts down over email. That would be the headline, and it would be covered, you know, probably pretty well. But for some reason, when Shaun King does it, it just goes into the abyss, and the only people interested in the story are journalists. You know, pretty much you and I and Chuck. That's what it comes down to. It's the three of us. And I know though that other people are interested because when we post the Shaun King story, a lot of people click on them, a lot of people share it.
I think you guys are brave, you know, because I've got gay privilege. You see, I'm allowed to go for other minorities because I can pull the gay card. You see, so you guys are pretty brave.
Well, Chuck is the bravest, right? Because he's the white male. I mean, technically, I guess I'm sort of the Aryan race.
You're white-ish. You're white-ish, aren't you?
Right.
Where are you from?
I'm a Persian descent, so I'm Middle Eastern.
Persian. Okay.
Right.
Fine. All right. Okay, good. So you sometimes that's excellent. Okay. Well, yeah, and he's although I suppose he's got ginger privilege, hasn't he? Chuck's got a little bit of orange there. Maybe that's how we're all getting away with it. So somebody sent me an email while we've been talking and said that very often people start trolling, which it seems like Shaun King is doing to all of us as part of an exit strategy. is a way of sort of undermining the seriousness of the whole fiasco. To make it all seem sort of messy and uninteresting to the wider world, as though it's sort of trivial and unimportant, which of course it isn't in this case. Do you think there's any possibility that he's going to get out of the game? I mean, I've got a column coming out, I think, tomorrow, sort of slightly sarcastically titled "Career Tips for Shaun King." You know, time to return to Bible study class, where I suggest that he may wish to reacquaint himself with the Ten Commandments and return to his days as a Facebook pastor and give up on the business of journalism, because it's clearly not he's clearly not suited to it. But I mean, is he gearing up to get out of the game? I mean, as you say, he just seems to be able to publish anything. I mean, at the same time that people are asking questions about his financial affairs, he's publishing columns on the New York Daily News, calling Donald Trump a Nazi, saying that gun owners are, white supremacists. He's, posting amazing tweets about guns. He also went on a sort of huge tweet spree, didn't he? You know what? I'm going to go off on a tangent. I'm fascinated by stuff like this. I love watching how people behave under pressure, or particularly and specifically when they've been caught out. And when he deleted all those tweets, he then started retweeting a lot of very worthy, sort of noble goal stuff, about sort of black people who'd been allegedly mistreated by the police, and all of this sort of heart-rending stuff, almost as if he was trying to prove his worth to people. So say, remember why I matter, don't worry about all of that stuff, but like, here's the really important stuff that you need to keep reading me for. Notwithstanding that, he's lost, which I think is unprecedented, by the way. I think it's unprecedented for a public figure to start losing followers. I've never seen it. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Someone can correct me in the comments or something. But I've seen people stop getting new followers.
Yes.
I've seen people sort of go on a mass block spree themselves, which has some weird effects with the numbers. But I've never seen a public figure have a dramatic drop in followers. It's a really significant and quite dramatic thing. I've just never seen it before. And King's lost 2,500 followers since, I think, the last 36 hours. My researcher has just told me on that. 2,500 followers, and I've never seen anything like it before. It seems to me like he's in the throes of deciding whether or not he should continue to do this, whether or not to get out of it. His life is obviously in turmoil. He's obviously, deeply miserable doing all of this stuff. And what do you think? Do you think this trolling is part of an exit strategy? Do you think he's doubling down and he's not going anywhere? What's next for Shaun King?
That's a good question. So when he started deleting tweets, the one thing that struck me is there's something in these 70,000 tweets that he doesn't want someone to see. And so he's just going to take proactive action and just wipe his entire account. So that's one possibility maybe on why he did that. When people started digging through his past and he did not appreciate that very much, he decided he's going to delete all those tweets. The other maybe thing was that led me to think is maybe he's just trying to reinvent himself. He's just trying to wipe his entire past clean and just
he's going to go white again.
To sort of start afresh.
He's going to whitewash himself. I think lots of people made that joke. He was whitewashing his Twitter.
I did see that joke quite a bit. So that maybe he's got a gig. I think maybe the New York Daily News, and they've talked to him maybe, and he's decided that he's going to just delete his entire account and start fresh and try to make this New York Daily News thing work. I thought that was my kind of impression.
But he's still deleting stuff, because he posted that apology to Black Lives Matter and then deleted that as well. And then, but it doesn't seem to be much rhyme or reason to it. It seems very chaotic, almost like somebody sort of at home in a sort of fugue state, just sort of just stabbing at things, hoping something will work.
So there might be an actual explanation onto why he's deleted some of his recent tweets. I think if you don't take him at his word, and there are hundreds of thousands of people deleting tweets, which is obviously not happening, if he had signed up for a mass deletions service, you can't just delete 70,000 tweets at once. So it has to happen in increments, and I don't think those can discriminate based on what's new and what's not. It just starts wiping deleting 10 tweets, deleting 10 tweets, and over and over and over again.
I would love if
what might be happening is that he never finished deleting all his tweets until recently, and so he was tweeting out stuff, and then that stupid service would just come up and wipe all his.
I love the idea that he sort of set it going and doesn't know how to turn it off. and so it's never going to get to more than 800 tweets because it's sort of like it's following him, it's racing up behind him, and sort of gobbling up tweets like no, I wanted that one. It just sort of now it's become this sort of insatiable beast nipping at his heels, deleting everything he posts. I mean, maybe it's a good news for him because he seems to get himself in so much trouble with what he posts on social media. I had another suggestion from a reader, which is, and by the way, I'm going to, as we're getting into the sort of home stretch of this stream, we're going to hear from Alex Milo, editor-in-chief of Breitbart.com, a little bit later on, and I also want to give Alan Bakari, who's officially on this call, but I have ignored for the last hour and a half, a heads up, and I'm going to bring him on shortly as well. So if you can hear me, Alan, then get yourself ready. I'm going to also start looking at the chat, which I know is a bad idea, but I'm going to have a look. And also, if you want to send in any questions, you can do that to me on Twitter, and we'll have a quick, brief discussion in the limited time we have left. What have we got left? A little bit. Here's another suggestion from a reader that I want to bounce off you, see what you think about it. So, somebody has told me that the reason that Justice Together closed when it did was to avoid the end-of-year filing dates, so that it didn't have to put in a tax return. Do you think that could be likely, or do you think it's more likely just to be sort of chaos and panic?
I'm not terribly good at I'm not a financial expert or tax expert, but that seems like to be a plausible theory that would make some sense. I do know this is interesting. He was tweeting out the other day. He tweeted out several receipts saying look, I refunded everyone. And he was getting tweets back that said, things like, we still have questions, this person still hasn't been refunded, and a receipt showing 5 refunds doesn't account for the mass amount of donations that were given. So I think
because he started tweeting receipts, didn't he? As proof that he'd done all these refunds, but individual.
But they only showed a few refunds, and there were I don't know, I would imagine hundreds of donations, maybe thousands, and so to tweet out a receipt with 5 refunds does not really, I think, answer the questions. And I think he was getting that input back in mass, right? People were tweeting at him saying, we still have questions. There was still that big public column that, keep in mind, that his own board members wrote in public, a letter to him saying that they had questions about what happened to the money. Mm-hmm. And so I don't think you don't have to believe me. He hasn't satisfactorily answered it to me, but he hasn't answered his own board members, right? They're not satisfied with the answers. And people like DeRay McKesson are not satisfied with the answers. Someone asked DeRay yesterday after he tweeted out those receipts. He said, "Are you going to take back what you said? It looks like he's right." And he said, "No, my comment still stands. I still have a lot of questions that have not been answered by King, and he won't take DeRay's calls anymore." And so again, you don't have to believe me. You don't have to. No one has to believe Milo. Just look at what his own board members were saying.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Right, let's go to, I'm going to have a quick look and see if there are any interesting comments from people who want to contribute something. I have a comment here that says, everything about his story is parts of a narrative to the liberal establishment. It's designed to say Shaun is so brave, ranging from the first hate crime to the hope mob in questionable justice activities. So between his good PR and the so brave reaction, no one looks at him. Meanwhile, he's making a mockery of the idea of justice. He's the last person that should be a justice reporter. I think lots of people are going to have that view, aren't they, Oliver? That this is an extraordinary choice, isn't it, for the New York Daily News to make a justice reporter? Somebody does this stuff.
Do you think they even understood what they were getting when they signed him on, or maybe it was just a poor vetting process?
But look, he was at the Daily Kos, right? And we broke the story about the race stuff after Vicky Pate did hers. We broke that story. There were all these questions about finances that we didn't even get around to because our lawyers were like, can we just deal with one thing at once, please? And in the end, I sort of took pity on my editors and our lawyers and just said, yeah, okay. We didn't even publish all of that stuff. And meanwhile, you've got Chuck Ross and you've got you. I mean, somewhere in the New York Daily News, there's got to be a competent editor. Somewhere in that organization, there's got to be a guy who's like, I would quite like to know the answers to these questions before we allow this guy access to our publishing platform. I'd quite like to know if he's stolen money, if he's white, if he's adding children, randomly on, every time he tweets about his kids. It's absolutely amazing. I'm going to have a quick look, see if there are any other comments. Somebody else has written in to say, if you terminate a non-profit, you get a 4.5-month extension to file your 990 form. Otherwise, he would have had to file in December. So it's possible that he wrapped justice. I think the implication of this comment is that he wrapped up justice together now to avoid a December filing date with the IRS. That's interesting. I'm going to have a look on Twitter, see if anybody has anything to say on Twitter. Let's have a look. Not really. Let's have a look. You're looking very cute tonight. Well, thank you, I know. And what else? What else? Actually, it's mostly just compliments about my hair, and somebody saying that thank you for getting Oliver on from the Blaze. He's very informative. Good. That's good feedback. Right. Let's have a quick look. I know I'm going to regret this. Let's have a look in the chat. The chat, of course, being the most the chat on a live YouTube is the sort of wild west of the web. It's that full reckless abandon, abandon hope all ye who enter here. But as free speech central, we're gonna have a little look. So let me take a little look in the chat and see what people are saying. There are some Donald Trump supporters in the chat saying you can't stump the Trump. This is a windmill of friendship with a sign that I don't remember for anything particularly friendly in history. Milo, you look gorgeous, darling. Sorry, I shouldn't read those out. It's enormously self-serving of me, isn't it? Right, let's go back a bit. Let's have a look. This is fabulous. Oh, goodness. There's some very, very particular. Milo ain't no fag, bruv. Oh yes. So there was a stabbing in London, and the perpetrator said, "This is for Syria," and apparently someone else was on the video saying, "You ain't no Muslim, bruv," sort of saying you don't speak for Islam. So yes, there's some great memes going on in the chat. I'm happy about that. Now, I'm going to check with Alan Bakari next. There we go. I think he's here. Hello, Alan.
Hello, Milo.
Hi, so Alan is my deputy at Breitbart Tech. He writes, basically Alan is much smarter than I am. He does all of the clever think pieces and contextual sort of intellectual stuff around my hell raising. Alan, you wrote a great column on the Shaun King controversy yesterday, and you've also had a chance to catch up with my stuff as well over the last day or two. What do you make of all of this?
Well, it's interesting. You're implying that I read your stuff, by the way. That's not necessarily the case.
I know you read me slavishly. Now, carry on.
What I found interesting about the whole Shaun King thing is that you now have a situation where the Black Lives Matter movement is essentially split. They have to choose whether to believe Shaun King on the one hand, or DeRay Mackison and other Black Lives Matter leaders on the other hand. So you've got factions forming. But the real question is, who can Black Lives Matter trust, full stop? Because what we saw with Shaun King is what we see so commonly among any political movement that's based on victimhood and identity politics, which is people taking advantage of the empathy of the public. What you saw with Shaun King is funds for earthquake victims, for a teenage boy who was mistakenly shot by police. So these were issues that got to people's hearts. And when you get people's hearts like that, you can get them to donate vast amounts of sums. We saw that with Anita Sarkeesian as well. We see that with any sort of.
Tell viewers who Anita Sarkeesian is, because some people watching this will just be watching for the Shaun King stuff, and they won't know about her.
Right. So in the case of Anita Sarkeesian, you had someone who was subject to a mob of internet trolls who relentlessly mocked her for a period of weeks. And the feminist activists and feminist sympathizers in the media turned it into a huge narrative about how Sarkeesian was victimized. And the result of this narrative was that funds started pouring into her Kickstarter campaign. She was running a campaign at the time to fund a series of videos about sexism in video games. We also see this phenomenon in the case of Ahmed Mohammed, the boy who took a clock into school and it was mistaken for a bomb and he was arrested. Once that story got out, people saw him as a victim. People started to empathize, and it created this cascade of virtue signaling on social media that, as we all know, ended with the White House.
Is your theory that Shaun King gets away with all of this because he has painted himself as sort of the ultimate victim, and he's done it very effectively?
I think what he did was he presented himself as a champion of victims. He was the person drawing attention with a large social media following, drawing attention to these legitimately tragic events like earthquakes and mistaken shootings. And when people hear
So
stories
like
like
a
that,
victim kingmaker. If you take victimhood,
yes.
it's a grievance culture. If you take victimhood as the new currency in
Hmm.
culture, you know, you can get whatever you want. You can get status and money and power if you're enough of a victim. Shaun King was setting himself up almost as a sort of central bank of victim bucks, and he was
More
able
or
to
less.
sort of dish out victimhood credits to people, and this was the source of his power. That's a fascinating theory. But of course, he did also present himself as a victim, didn't he? Oliver, there's a picture still on top of. I'm gonna see if I can show people. There's a picture on top of Shaun King's Twitter profile. Now I'm going to have to go to Safari because I think he's blocked me, so I'm logged in Chrome.
Of course he has.
Isn't it like
Well, yeah.
see the account when it's?
Yeah, I think I have to log out, otherwise he's not going to let me see his account. But
Try incognito browsing works too.
oh yeah, there's this newfangled thing. Right, I'm gonna. There we go. Let's have a look. Perfect. I'm going to share this with you all. This is, I find this personally really quite weird. This header image that he's chosen for his Twitter profile. Can you all see that?
Yeah.
So not only has he picked a picture of himself where he says he's beaten up by rednecks, he's got all these sort of weird filtered photographs of him looking, you know, as black as possible with the fade haircut and the moustache, and that picture of him young where he thinks he looks really black, and one where he's a bit whiter, he's put it into black and white. It's a really remarkable and quite psychologically enlightening sort of selection of photos, isn't it? But in addition to being a sort of victim kingmaker, he's quite obviously wanting to be seen as some sort of heroic figure with these, you know, this sort of penetrating stare on the left, and then a victim himself that he said, you know, as he says, sort of somebody beating up. It's just a sort of remarkable testament to how far you can get in society these days, if only you will claim to have been overtaken by circumstance and oppression.
This is the interesting thing that's caused by social media, I think, because obviously humans have always had empathy for victims, and people have always taken advantage of that throughout history. But what happens with social media is that you also get virtue signaling. So you get people competing who can help out the victims the most. And I think this is what Shaun King has taken advantage of, clearly.
I see. It's fascinating. We're going to wrap up soon. I think we're going to get a quick little goodbye with Breitbart's editor-in-chief, Alex Marlow. In the meantime, Oliver, before we let you go, what's next for this story? What are you going to be looking out for? Are you done with this, or are you going to? Is there somewhere else we're going?
You know, I'm not. We're not done with this yet, not by a long shot. And I think the next step here, I don't want to reveal too much, is getting some answers sort of from the New York Daily News, because clearly Shaun King is not going to get us answers. But I think the New York Daily News owes its readers, you know, an explanation as to what exactly is going on. And you know, being in New York City, we have a little more access than you do to the New York Daily News. So I'd like to get some answers. You know, maybe from an official there or something. I'm not quite sure yet, but I think that's sort of the next step in this, is going to them and asking for some answers to hard questions.
Perfect. Well, listen, Oliver, it's been great to have you for so long, and thank you for holding down the fort. Unfortunately, we didn't get Chuck Ross, but it's been absolutely terrific. So thank you very much for joining us. That's Oliver Darcy from The Blaze, and you can look him up online. What are you, at Oliver Darcy on Twitter?
I'm at Oliver Darcy.
That was a good guess. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks for thank you. It's been terrific. So thanks for joining us. And see you soon. And to wrap up, I will say hello to Alex Marlow, who is the editor-in-chief of Breitbart.com. Hello, boss. Oh, I think we need to. I don't think we can hear you. These things do happen. These crazy live streams. Everybody's got something wrong. While you're sorting out your... No, I don't think we're there. While you're sorting out your microphone, let me just ask Alan, you've sort of followed a lot of this grievance culture.
Yes.
You've looked into... it's a very advised yes. You've looked into how these people operate, and I'm interested in your opinion on whether this sort of trolling through emails and this weird Twitter behavior, does that look like the sort of exit script, the sort of exit strategy that we've seen in the past from progressive activists like Randy Harper, for example, who start to, or maybe Shanley Kane, the feminist activist in Silicon Valley, people who start to behave bizarrely, they sort of wander off script and start to sort of tweet at strange hours of the day and reply weirdly to journalists when they know that the jig is up. Does this fit a pattern that you've seen previously? And what would be your, as somebody who's followed this for a couple of months, what would be your prediction about how Shaun King's going to play this next?
Well, it's interesting because what happened with Shanley and Randy Harper is that they did have these sort of breakdowns, and then eventually a lot of their initial followers just simply abandoned them. And we're already seeing this happening on a much larger scale with Shaun King, thousands of followers lost, as you saw earlier. So I think we'll continue seeing that happen. But he still has people retweeting him. He still has considerable engagement on his tweets. So I think what you'll see is a standoff between Shaun King supporters and DeRay Mackinson supporters.
This is going to be a sort of protracted civil war between the various factions of Black Lives Matter, some of whom care about money and race, some of whom are just sort of blind Shaun King fans who will go along with the virtue signaling stuff.
Yeah, really, and Shaun King himself has built his entire career and public profile on this, so he can't let go of it at all. So he's going to stick around. And the question is whether DeRay and other leaders of Black Lives Matter will choose to ignore him, or whether they'll even be able to ignore him.
Let's bring in Alex, if you're able. Alex Marlowe, can we Alex Marlowe? Can we hear you? No, I don't think we can. Oh, that's a terrible shame. We're gonna hang on for an extra. We do have 8 minutes left, so hopefully we can get round up from Alex about Breitbart's involvement in this story. This is an absolutely extraordinary saga, which is really it started with Vicky Pate, and we heard 2 hours ago at the beginning of the show how she started to get suspicious about this guy called Shaun King who was making claims that didn't really stack up. And she discovered that there were questions about money. She found out that there were inconsistencies in his biography. He claimed to have various different numbers of children at different times. The police report about an alleged assault that he says happened didn't stack up either. And eventually she stumbled across the race issue, which she shared with us. And we wrote a story that went all around the world. Hundreds of different media outlets reported on Shaun King's race controversy. A controversy he's never properly addressed. He claims now that the 2 white people on his birth certificate are not his biological parents. Only one of them is, but hasn't offered any evidence of that, and has turned down an offer of tens of thousands of dollars for Black Lives Matter from a black political action committee to prove it with a DNA test. Now there are questions raised by the former activists and the former donors for Justice Together, an organization that he set up and shut down in December. One of our readers suggested today it might be because prior to December, if you close down a charity, you get an extra 3 to 6 months to file your 990 with the IRS. So kicking down the road his obligations to disclose what happened to the money. And he's been ostracized, he's been excommunicated from the Black Lives Matter movement by DeRay Mackinson and by Jonetta Elsie. And one of the most extraordinary social media meltdowns I think we've seen anywhere on the political spectrum in American public life for perhaps half a decade. It's been a really extraordinary thing to watch, and Breitbart reporters like Alam and myself have been right at the heart of this, and with a couple of colleagues from the rest of the conservative blogosphere really following this. But what's been absolutely remarkable, and I hope that we get Alex. Alex at some point able to chip in on this. Can we say something for me, Alex? Yeah. Can you speak? Try. Go on. No, we're not there. We're gonna have to talk about it on the radio, Alex. What has he got there? Oh, yeah, no, I'm sorry. What's been absolutely remarkable about this, despite the sort of dogged reporting from places like Breitbart, and despite the extraordinary outpouring of questions and anxiety from Shaun King's own supporters, is just how little the mainstream media has given any attention to this story whatsoever. They covered the race controversy, sure, but the more important controversy, the more important questions have been raised by Shaun King's own supporters about where the money went, still remain unanswered, and they remain unanswered in part because broadcast media and newspapers don't want to touch this story. And over the last 2 hours, we've asked ourselves why that might be. We've asked a few journalists, and nobody really seems to know that it keeps coming down to identity politics. It keeps coming down to this idea that if you have a certain kind of identity, if you are gay or black or a woman, you inherit certain privileges that come along with that identity. You're more invulnerable to questions, and fewer people are going to be brave enough to publish questions about what you're doing in journalistic outlets. That seems to me to be entirely wrong. It seems to me, as Alan Bakari, my colleague, has suggested, that, and as I've shared too on radio shows previously, and Breitbart News Daily, which you should tune into on SiriusXM Patriots. It's a good show with our chairman Stephen Bannon, and other interviews about the subject. It seems as though in America today that victimhood is a currency almost as strong as the dollar, and that if you can only get yourself described as a victim by someone, somehow, somewhere, you can get away with murder. And if you belong to one of those special victim groups, whether you're born with the right skin color or in the right gender or the right sexuality, but you can take credulous people for a ride, provided you have the right politics. The case of Shaun King has been really very peculiar to follow, and I'm sure it's not over yet. I'm sure there's much more to come. So thank you to all the guests who have been with me, and thanks to Alan and Michael who've stuck with me to the end, and thanks to all the guests that we've had on. Who knows? Will the New York Daily News come to their senses and at least put out a public statement about this? Will Shaun King get out of the journalism gig? Who knows? I've been Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm the technology editor of Breitbart. I run, along with Noah Doulis, the Breitbart Tech Vertical, where we have a pretty broad remit to talk not just about tech, but about online controversies too, social justice, campus crazies, and all sorts of other things. So you should come and read Alan Bakari on campus crazies, free speech and privacy. Come and read me on hell-raising about various different internet personalities, and our crack team of reporters who talk about all kinds of wacky and wonderful online controversies. Thank you very much for joining us. This video is going to be available on Breitbart.com shortly afterwards. Tonight is the Republican debate, which I'm sure many of you will be tuning into. So I will sign off now, let you go and prepare for what I'm sure will be a furious evening of jokes and live tweeting. Thanks very much. I'm Milo Yiannopoulos.